All right, this week, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry signed into law some legislation making his state the first in the nation to require the 10 Commandments to be posted in every public school classroom. The key word there, I hope you caught it. This bill would require the 10 Commandments to be posted in every public school classroom. Of course, critics of the legislation, including the ACLU of Louisiana and the Southern Poverty Law Center, they're all arguing that the law violates students and families' right to religious freedom. But in a society that applauds flying the pride flag in schools, do their demands for their ideology, do their demands really miss the mark? Well, joining me now in our weekly Worldview segment to discuss this and more is Joseph Backholm. He's a senior fellow at the Family Research Council's Center for Biblical Worldview. Joseph, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to have you.
Good to see you, Jody. Thank you.
All right. Well, let me start by playing this clip of a rant by Whoopi Goldberg this week on The View in response to this bill coming out of Louisiana.
I'm not asking you to believe what I believe. I'm not asking your kid to believe what I believe. Public school is public school. Yeah. It means everybody can go to public school. I don't understand why, if you want your child to have a religious education, send them to a religious school. Yeah. There's nothing stopping you. Get out of my pocket, get out of my body, and get out of my school.
And back at you, Whoopi. I mean, Joseph, really, is the radical left asking us to believe what they believe by demanding all their radical stuff on our children?
Well, I think the response there to Whoopi is that public schools are religious schools, and that's really what this moment requires us to recognize. And it is ironic that this decision has come down, or this has happened in Louisiana in June, which is perhaps it is the longest religious holiday in the West these days. But we should see it as a religious holiday, but we have not seen it as a religious holiday. And the reality is, religions come in different flavors, shapes, and sizes, and we worship different gods. And to be sure, the 10 Commandments have religious origins for sure. They also have historical significance to the United States and to the Judeo-Christian perspective, which is the foundation of Western civilization. And that's just a historical reality. So there are, objective kind of secular reasons to want the idea that we shouldn't cheat on our spouses and steal from each other and kill each other. Those are values that we should be able to unite around. And of course, that's what the 10 Commandments exists to do. But what Whoopi Goldberg is trying to convince us of is that there is otherwise, if the 10 Commandments are not in government schools, that we are somehow dealing with a neutral space where no values are being encouraged. And that is simply not the case. And Pride Month is perhaps the best illustration of that. And we see examples of it throughout the school year, to be sure. But pride flags represent a set of religious values about who is in charge, what is the source of truth. And they would say, we are in charge and our feelings are the source of truth. And those are just different religious convictions than what Scripture gives us.
Absolutely. Well said. And that's exactly right. I mean, our public schools have become centers of indoctrination for a worldview, a secular worldview that in and of itself, as you so well described, is a religious belief unto itself. On social media this week, you got involved in an argument. Someone basically said that if you don't want the Quran in schools, then you likewise should not want the 10 Commandments in school. How do you respond to that kind of argument?
Well, I think, across the political spectrum, we're dealing with this challenge. And, a lot of Christians and conservative Christians celebrate the fact that the 10 Commandments have been have been said you required to be placed in public schools. And there is a response to that. And I think it is a fair response that requires consideration that, well, that is a religious statement that you like. But what happens when a different legislative majority says we would like to have the Quran placed in government schools? Now, there's a huge difference because the Quran has no historical significance to the state of Louisiana or the United States. And our laws are not based on the Quran, and Lord willing, they never will be. Those are places that we don't want to live. But the fact is, those are competing religious documents. And what we have to consider is to what extent do we want the government imposing certain religious teachings on us? And if we are going to allow the Ten Commandments to be required, should the Quran be required? There's differences, but there are similarities, and that's part of the debate that we're having. But for those who would say the Ten Commandments cannot be considered, many of them, like Whoopi Goldberg, are very comfortable with the idea of a pride flag in a classroom, but would say the Ten Commandments should be verboten because that's religious. And what they're, of course, missing is the inherently religious nature of all those symbols. So to me, Jody, what the question here is we as believers and just as thinkers need to understand there's no neutral ground. America's classrooms have never been neutral ground. They will not be neutral ground. But as we become increasingly pluralistic in terms of our religious secularism, and then the majority, a growing number of people who follow religions like Islam, it just is making it clear how difficult it is to have a one-size-fits-all education system that pretends to serve everyone, because the government system is always going to be teaching some things are good, some things are bad, some things are desirable, some things are undesirable. It always has been that way. It always will be that way. And now that we have a growing number of, Islam adherents, still a significant number of Christians, and then we have all these religious secularists in kind of the religion of pride. You can't serve all those constituencies. So what we have to do is stop trying. And I think as a practical matter and as a policy matter, one of the responses need to be that we need to give families the choice to determine what the religious upbringing of their children is. Because what the government's trying to do right now is maintain a monopoly on that and say, unless you're wealthy, the only option you have is to go to our schools which teach the religion of pride. And that, of course, is the establishment of religion that we should be trying to avoid. What we need to do and what we are doing, and there's momentum in this direction, and I believe it will continue to develop, and we should support that effort, is give parents the right to choose for themselves what institution am I going to go to, and what are they going to teach my kids. And if I don't like the values that institution, if I don't like the religion of pride, or I don't like the religion of Islam, or I don't even like the religion of Christianity, I should not be forced to send my kid to an institution that does those things. And so choice is really the answer, because what we're seeing is a one size fits all just fits no one.
Yeah, good point. And I can put an exclamation point, if you will, on what you said, that there is no neutrality. I certainly saw that in my time in Congress. Every piece of legislation has behind it a certain worldview, a certain value system that would dictate either the passage of or the opposition toward whatever piece of legislation is being offered. All of these things. And people say, we've all heard the argument, you can't legislate morality. That's what every law that we have is legislating, is morality. And that certainly, that principle, that concept of understanding certainly applies to the public school system as well. Let's get back to Louisiana. I want to get your thoughts more specifically on this. The governor there, Jeff Landry, is certainly anticipating a very negative response from the left. In fact, at the bill's signing, he made some comment to the effect that he can't wait to get sued. Even the ACLU would concede that the Ten Commandments are a historical document. It is a religious text, but it is a historical document as well. Wouldn't they agree to that?
Well, it's going to be ironic should this case ever make it to the United States, where they will be, arguing that the Ten Commandments are unconstitutional in a place where the Ten Commandments are being publicly presented, right? And there are state Supreme Courts.
Well, and they're all over
also.
Washington, D.C.
Correct.
They're all over the place.
And so
yeah.
it shows the kind of inherent challenge that secularism and the ACLU has, and the Freedom from Religion foundations have, in making the argument that the founders wrote our Constitution to protect us from the Ten Commandments. The historical record makes it very clear that's not the case. They wanted to make sure there was not an establishment of religion, that people weren't punished for believing something different than what the majority believed. But in no sense did our founders intend to disqualify ideas that happen to be religious. And of course, we see the consequences when we get unmoored from any source of truth, and when every single individual believes that they are the final source of truth. It's creating a chaotic environment for us today. But no, our founders did not believe that we must scrub the public square of every religious heritage, piece of our history, and every kind of connection to religious ideas. That's not how our Constitution works. Religious people are welcome to bring their religious convictions, whatever they may be, to the public square. And in no sense are we guaranteed to be free from the expression of any religious idea. And back to the original point, that's actually an impossible objective, because whether you worship God, or you worship Muhammad, or you worship, the pride flag, and the ideas represented by it, you are being a religious actor. That's the important point to remember. So we're all equally eligible to participate, but the government doesn't get to punish anyone because of what their beliefs are.
Great point. All right. Speaking of differences in all these and how those differences are brought to the public square, I want to switch over, if we can, to another topic. There was a recent poll that really showed the difference, if you will, between Trump and Biden voters when it comes to marriage and family. From your perspective, what is this informed of? What is it? What have we?
Yeah, well, this research from Pew asked the question: is society better off if we prioritize marriage and family? And there was a huge difference between those who said they were going to vote for Biden and those who said they were going to vote for Trump. Only 19% of Biden voters said that society is better off if they prioritize marriage and family. 59% of Trump voters said that society is better if you prioritize marriage and family. Now, from my perspective, both of those numbers are far too low, but the 40-point delta is really an insight into the worldview differences between the left and the right today. And frankly, kind of it's kind of a chicken or egg question. Does that worldview lead to the political priorities of the left, or did the political priorities of the left lead to necessarily devaluing marriage and family? But when you think about things like, the sexual revolution, which certainly has redefined marriage, and that leads to a lot of genetic dead ends. You have things like no-fault divorce. You have abortion, which of course exists to make sure there are fewer babies in the world. All of those legislative priorities are reflective of a worldview that says, the most important thing in life is not the family, and I don't have a duty to help build culture by building a family. I have a duty to serve myself, and so whatever is going to make me happiest in the next 10, 30 minutes, that's the priority. And what we all know, those of us who have been married and have children, is they are the enemy of comfort. They are certainly worth it, but they are inconvenient, to be sure, and that's really a long-term play for marriage and family. And increasingly, the left is making the short-term play and prioritizing that. And you're seeing that value system difference, that worldview difference, and how it's playing out in a lot of public policy. And basically, this poll is telling us, yes, we just don't value the same things on the different political sides of the aisle.
Yeah, and it's amazing how that is having such a rippling effect on so many different aspects of our culture. And I think you pose a good question with the chicken and egg. Did the policies create the worldview, or did the worldview create the policies? I think that's an interesting thing to ponder. I don't know that I can give a solid answer right now to that, but it's an interesting question. But the bottom line, the end result is this is impacting so many different thought processes in our country, be it abortion or same-sex marriages or gender ideology, all these types of things. It's having an impact across the board.
That's right, Jody. And it also allows us to have clarity about the choice that we're about to make in an election. If we empower the worldview that says marriage and family is not a priority, we will get more of that. We will get more of a culture that does not prioritize marriage and family. And the line has been drawn, the sides have been picked, and now we as voters and as citizens get to decide who do we want to lead us.
Great way to end this, Joseph. We appreciate it very much. Joseph Backholm, always an honor to speak with you. Thank you for your insight today.
Thank you, Jody. Good to be with you.